session of the year. We're really excited about this panel. Just to introduce ourselves quickly, my name is Janet O. I'm the Associate Director of Faculty Development, and back there with our mascot, Eli, is Daisy Lemus, Director of Faculty Development. We just wanted to welcome you to this space. We want to sort of start off the semester learning from some of our award-winning faculty. And the reason why we chose these faculty in particular is because they won their awards for their excellence in engaging with and working with students. And so as we're starting the year and sort of getting back into the role of working with students, we thought this would be a great conversation. So the idea really is that it'll be a conversation. I hope that you've all brought questions for them as we start the year. I have a few questions, but I'm hoping that we can take questions from the audience as well. So to start off, to introduce the idea of the awards, we have Steven Stepanek, who's our faculty president, to introduce the awards.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming here today. Basically, a little bit of background about these particular awards that these fine people have received. Each year, the faculty at California State University Northridge select from their own ranks outstanding faculty to be recognized for their accomplishments in the following 6 areas: distinguished teaching, counseling, or librarianship, for which up to 3 faculty each year can get that award; outstanding faculty, for which there can be up to 2 awardees; and then up to 1 awardee each in preeminent scholarly publication, exemplary creative accomplishments, visionary community service learning, and extraordinary service. And I want to stress, it's up to those particular counts. In some of these positions, we don't always fill in all the slots, but normally we find some very, very exciting things that our faculty are doing. In particular, for the Distinguished Teaching, Counseling, and Librarianship Award, the criteria for receiving this award is that you have to have a record of superlative teaching, counseling, or librarianship, and/or the development and successful utilization of a major curriculum improvement project that advances teaching effectiveness. To explain a little bit more about that particular superlative teaching, counseling, and librarianship, how is that evidenced? The particular nominee has to have a solid command of the subject, knowledge of recent developments in their field, creative and imaginative presentations, the ability to engage students in the learning process, excellent communication skills, and a concern for the welfare and future of their students. The way the process works is that the Senate Executive Committee and the faculty president are responsible for selecting the actual faculty who will serve on the separate review committees for each of these awards. Once these committees have been formed, nominations are accepted from the faculty, supporting evidence is presented, and the awards committees deliberate. The actual awardees are then honored during the honored faculty reception that occurs each May just prior to commencement. So that just gives you a little bit of background of the different faculty awards and a little bit of information about the particular awards that these 3 fine individuals have now earned. I'm now going to turn it back over to Janet, who's going to actually introduce our presenters today.
So I'm going to have a very brief introduction to the panel. I had the chance to talk with each of them one-on-one in preparing for this session. Learned a lot. I had expected each meeting to be about 20, 30 minutes. We ended up talking, I think, all of us for more than an hour each. And what really struck me on my one-on-one sessions with each of them was their holistic approach to students. So in working with students, they're not just interested in students in terms of their academic development, but just their overall personal development as well. And I hope that we can gain a little bit from that in our discussion today as well. So I'm going to give a very brief, like I said, introduction for each of the panelists. You're going to have to forgive me for the brevity. I'm just trying to get to our questions. But there's just so much that they've contributed to the university. I'm going to start on this end with Eric Garcia. So Eric Garcia, at the time of the award, Eric was the psychology and educational psychology and counseling librarian. And I just recently learned that he's now also the librarian for queer studies, sociology, and social work. So he's a busy guy. Eric's nomination for the Distinguished Librarianship Award was spearheaded by Meryl Simon and Carrie Rothstein-Fitch from Ed Psych and Counseling, and supported by faculty across various departments at this university. Eric's impact on students is huge. He reaches between 1,600 and 1,800 students annually. I'm thinking it might be more now that you have so many more departments, right? And despite this workload, faculty consistently note that Eric's presentations are not only informative, but also accessible and entertaining. Meryl Simon also asked me to note that Eric is collaborative, caring, and professional, and she also didn't want us to forget his trademark bow tie, which he's wearing today. This is how you find him. You can actually Google bow tie on the OVIAT website and find him that way. Next we have Joyce Bernstein. Joyce Bernstein is Associate Professor of Elementary Education, and I'm thrilled to announce that she's also the newly appointed Faculty Director of Community Engagement. So before coming to CSUN, Joyce taught elementary school for 15 years, and while at CSUN, she has served as the graduate coordinator of the MA program in elementary education. In her nomination for the Distinguished Teaching Award, her letter writers noted in particular her dedication to bridging theory and practice. She's truly devoted to mentoring her students both in and out of the classroom, and in fact, Joyce's nomination was led by one of her former students, Janine Letford, who herself received the 2010 Great American Teacher Award. And finally, we have Jerry Schutte. Jerry Schutte is a full professor in the sociology department. He's been at CSUN for 40 years, having previously spent 6 years at research universities, including Stanford and Columbia. He was nominated for the award by his colleagues in his department, Ellis Goddard and Loretta Winters, and his nomination was supported by letters from over 20 students, colleagues in sociology as well as other departments, and various administrators, including none other than the provost himself, who notes that Jerry is a campus leader in cutting-edge online curriculum design. So I think we have, a great panel here. I wanted to start off the questions, but before we start the questions, I wanted to give them each a chance to say maybe a few words about how they felt in receiving the award. You want to start us off, Jerry?
Well, I've been here too long and I'm too old to be surprised by anything anymore, positive or negative. But I do feel very blessed to have my colleagues recognize some of the efforts that I've been making over the certainly the last 20 years in trying to develop a new way of engaging students. And for that, I'm forever grateful. A friend of mine quoted me as saying, gee, it's like going to your funeral without being dead. All these great things are being said about you while you get to hear them. And I think that probably says it all.
Well, I was completely surprised and honored. And when I read the email, I had to read it 2 or 3 times because I thought, oh, they were telling me, oh, you didn't get it. So it was a complete surprise to me, and I just feel that it was especially wonderful that a student and a group of students wrote letters to support me. I think that's really important to what I do every day.
I was excited about when I heard about it. I received the award. I think I was Friday afternoon. I was jumping for joy. I think in the kitchen. But I think for me the process of individuals coming out of the woodwork and asking that they would be willing to write letters, that I in the field that I don't go out and ask for support for documentation in a tenure process. It was very well appreciated, and I felt loved in a way that I never thought one could be, in the joy of doing one's job, knowing that there are people out there that really have recognized you, but you just didn't know the amount of people that came out.
We can open it up for questions, or I have some questions prepared. Anyone have a question to start us off? Okay, I'll warm us up. Why don't we start with Jerry, our most, seasoned faculty member. So this is your experience, right? So what has changed in the time you've been here? So you've been here 40 years. What has changed in terms of, especially in terms of the student population? And given the realities of today, how can we support our students today, given that sort of perspective?
Oh gosh, there's been a myriad of changes in the last 40 years. Some are ethnic, some are sex-related, some are policy-related, some are discipline-related. But they've all come together in this confluence to, I think, produce a situation where more and more women have come back to school. That started in the 90s, and it's continuing to the point where there's about 60% females now versus a little under 40% for males. It also has an older flair to it. We're about 2 years older on average than we were 40 years ago. It has certainly an ethnic flavor. There are clearly more Hispanics entering, and more importantly than even the ethnic flavor, there is much more first-generation students entering at the university than ever before. And I think that presents a particular challenge as well as a particular effect, because students have told me repeatedly that the goal was not to graduate from college, the goal was to get into college, since it was their first shot and they were the first people in their family. And I've had to remind them that that's only a way station along the way, that getting into college is the first step, but graduating is the ultimate goal. That's a foreign concept to a lot of people. So I think that's very, very different. But I think that there is a kind of renewed hope in the sense that I believe that students here today have more of a purpose than students who have been around 40 years ago. I think 40 years ago there was this kind of natural matriculation from high school into college, and you just did what everybody was doing and that was the end of it. Now there's a very conscious effort to be the first in the family to be there, and I think that presents a sense of purpose that people heretofore haven't had. And I think that's one of the benefits and one of the joys of dealing with students today that we didn't have 40 years ago.
I have a question for Joyce. So what advice, part of sort of your identity in terms of working with students seems to be your mentoring relationship with students. So what advice would you give, especially some of our newer faculty who are actually in the audience today, in terms of establishing mentoring relationships with students?
Well, I start out the year trying to get to know my students really well. We do different types of autobiographies. I get a sense of their experiences out in the real world. And then I try to connect to them with the things that they're doing outside of the classroom as well as inside of the classroom. I teach in an applied field. I teach elementary education, graduate students, undergraduates, and fifth-year students, which means that they're getting their credential after they get their BA. And so they come to us with different types of experiences with children, and what I try to do is kind of bridge what I've done in the classroom to what happens in my methods classes and in my master's classes. So just getting to know your students and figuring out, where they're coming from, what are their experiences, and how can you draw some of that into classroom conversations, assignments, and things like that. That's been really successful.